Right, hello everyone. This is Sterling. So, ECG video series. So basically, when we were going through cardio block, found the ECGs to be a little bit on your own. Totally not a bad thing. There was definitely lots of comments throughout our class about wanting to have a more student kind of led resource to basically get a grasp of trying to read an ECG. Naturally, if you have like a cardiologist explaining the ECG, they're going to know every piece of it. And sometimes that's the challenge, is that as a beginner, you need someone who's a little bit closer to your expertise in reading the ECG, which is probably very little unless you have a background in nursing. So the purpose of this little video series is over reading week, or as the block is going through, you can watch like one video a day, do the assist.med practice cases, and just build up your confidence in reading ECG and using that with other materials. So I'm going to show you briefly just an overview of this series. So since it's made to kind of be done over reading week, it's 7 little PowerPoints. So the first one's on the basics of ECG. The second one's the first sentence of ECG reading, hypertrophy and intervals, Q waves, ST segment, T waves, tachycardias, supraventricular and ventricular, AV blocks and other conditions, and then just kind of like wrapping up. So stop share. So when I was going through the block, I found that some of the criteria took a little bit of memorizing to get down. So instead of constantly referring back to my notes to try to find the solution for, what's hypertrophy of the ventricle or the atria, stuff like that, I tried to make a cheat sheet as I went. Of course, it wasn't used on the test, but it's just so I could refer as I was learning the ECG. So I could look at it if I needed to cue myself about, what is left atrial enlargement, something like that. So let me show you that briefly. So this is the cheat sheet. So you can see it's basically just in a Word document. And so at the top, I have this little acronym, or it's not really an acronym, it's a sentence. Rare steak barbecue with Sterling. So essentially how I broke it down, and also I did this with a group, and we worked on kind of an acronym to remember how to read an ECG, is RARE stood for rate, axis, intervals, and rhythm. Steak stood for hypertrophy, because meat hypertrophies, so steak, meat. BBQ, so the BB stands for bundle of branches, so bundle of branch blocks. Q stands for Q waves. ST stands for Sterling. ST stands for ST segment, and R stands for like R waves, so R wave progression. At this point, you probably aren't going to be able to absorb everything that we just said with that little sentence, but it's just getting you orientated to what this is. So the sheet is broken down into rate, axes, intervals, rhythm, hypertrophy, bundle branch blocks, Q waves, R waves, ST segments, T waves. And it has all the criteria. So if we're talking about bradycardia here, under 60 would be bradycardia. And we know it's from the sinus node if upright P waves are present. However, at this point, you still need to get oriented to what an ECG is, let alone going through a whole short form, shorthanded cheat sheet of how to know what you're trying to read on the ECG. So let's close that, and let's go now to the PowerPoint. So again, it's a 7 video series. I'm going to try to keep the video short, so it's maximizing your practice. And I'll do some practice ECGs, kind of just selected from assist.med, and then you can do the rest to get your own practice and develop your skill. So let's go to the PowerPoint. So ECG series video 1, Basics of ECG, credit to U of A. So the resource I used to build all of this is from the Cardio Block lecture notes, teachingmedicine.com, which is the website we used in our year to learn ECGs, Lily's Pathophysiology of Heart Disease textbook, really great textbook, and BOSS, which is like an online resource. I used their tables just to help summarize some of the content as we go through, and Google Images. I primarily used these 3 resources for everything, and these, what I'd say, is what you want to refer to if you're double checking something. This is just for ease of, PowerPoint. So outline for this first session is talking about ECG basics, so lead positioning, the areas of the heart that's covering, the blood supply of the heart, which is especially important for, MIs, myocardial infarctions, what a PQRST stands for, and what a normal ECG even looks like. And then we'll do, there's some practice ECGs. Here it's going to be on assess.med, as is every PowerPoint. So lead positioning. So when we put the leads on the body, there's two types of leads. There's limb leads and there is precordial or chest leads. So we're going to start with talking about limb leads, so arms and legs. So you can see you can put leads on the arms and on the legs, self-explanatory. And essentially what happens is when the heart depolarizes or sends an electrical charge through it to contract the muscle, we can read that charge by having those those leads, those, electrical sensors on the limbs. So if we then had the charge and the charge is going this way, we can measure it from lead 1. So lead 1 is pointing to the left. So it'd be going across the person in this direction. Lead 2 is going to be pointing down also towards the left, but towards the foot. So it's going towards the foot. And lead 3 is going down the other way. It's going down towards the right foot. So lead 1 going across, lead 2 going to the bottom left, lead 3 going to the bottom right. Next slide, I'll summarize that again. So we're going to start over here. So if you look at the red line, lead 1 is going to the left, lead 2 is going to the bottom left at 60, and lead 3 is going to the bottom right at 120. 0 is straight to the left. You can also augment the leads, so you can essentially use programming and software to be able to combine the leads and figure out additional views of the heart. They're computer generated, so you're not going to see a sticky pad there to help read it. It's the computer solving it. So over here we have AVL, so this is to the left, it's just above lead 1. We have AVF going straight down to the feet, and AVR going up to the right. So if we looked on here, AVL would just be above lead 1 at -30. So this is negative, this is positive. We have AVF towards the feet and AVR at -150. So it's up and towards the right of the body. So if we're looking at the body, it's the right arm. Okay, so precordial leads. So we said limb leads. Now we're on to precordial. So when we're talking about a 12-lead ECG, there are 6 views that we get from the chest leads, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can see them here. So if we put the chest leads on, and say it was on me, it would be on the right side of my chest, then my left, then kind of across, and then into my armpit, axilla, down here. Kind of a little bit lower than your armpit, but you get the idea. So we call this one right here, this orange one, V1, V2 is right here, V3, V4, and then, so V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, and V6. So adding them together, we have these 6 leads from the limbs, these 6 leads from the chest. So we get a 12-lead ECG. So showing the chest leads again, so the precordial leads. So V1 is here and V2 is there. So what area of the heart I'd be showing is right here. So this would be the right atrium and this would be the septum. So the septum is the part between the 2 ventricles chambers. And then you can see here V3 and V4 are in the anterior part of the heart. So V3, V4. And then on the lateral side, or the edge of the body, V5 and V6 on the left side. So that'd be like V5, V6 on the chest. So that's where you'd be seeing it. So what's important is to understand what parts of the heart are being fed blood, and then what areas of the heart are being read by the ECGs, because that's what we're trying to find out. If somebody had a heart attack, which blood vessel was occluded? So V1 and V2 are looking at the septal area of the heart in the front here. So the septum being the part between the 2 ventricles. Anterior is kind of actually like V1 through 4, but especially V3 and V4 is really the front of the heart. And there's V5 and V6 off to the side. There's also lead V4R, so you'd have to unstick one of these leads or add an additional one and put it on this side. So it'd be way over on the right side of the chest. So if this is the left side of me, you'd have to take a lead over, put it on the right. So that's one of the additional leads you could use. There's also V8 and V9. So if I was on the front here, so this is where the leads would normally be, you could take a couple and stick them around my back. And that would see more of the back of my heart. So the blood supply then can be shown on the leads. So if we had V4R, so the right side V4R, so instead of there, it'd be over here. That would show the right coronary, right side of the heart, right coronary blood vessel. If you were looking at, say, V1, 2, 3, or 4, you're looking at the left anterior descending artery, which goes down the front middle part of the heart. If you're looking at V5 and V6, you're looking more at the left circumflex artery, which is going around the left side of the heart. And then the posterior leads are going to see the posterior descending artery, which is usually arising from the right coronary artery. So it comes around, brings a blood vessel behind the heart. Sometimes, though, that posterior descending artery comes from the circumflex, in which case V8 and V9 would be looking at the circumflex artery, and still, of course, feeding into that posterior descending artery. So if we then took a photo of the heart and then just put the leads in where they match, so right coronary artery, V4R, left anterior descending, V1 through 4, posterior descending artery, which would be like on the bottom of the heart going behind it. You can use leads 2, 3, and AVF, which are all inferior. I'll show you another picture showing this. Posterior would also catch it, so V8 and V9. The mirror image of the posterior leads would be V1 and 2, because they're in the front, V8 and 9 are in the back. So if you had a Q wave in V8 and 9 from a posterior infarction of the heart, so a posterior heart attack, then the front guys would show a really big R wave. And we'll come back to this. And then the circumflex could be feeding the posterior descending artery. It depends on anatomy of the person, in which case V5 and V6 would be really good leads to be seeing an occlusion in that blood vessel. And the last one is the left circumflex artery. Lead 1 and AVL would be able to see that left side. V5 and V6 could also see it. However, your big ones are 1 and AVL, right? So looking at an ECG, so we have different waves. So here we have a P, and then this part going down is the Q. The peak is R. The next bottom part is an S, and then T over here. It's the second hump. And then P, Q, R, S, T. So P wave stands for the atrial depolarization. So the atrial depolarize, and then the ventricles fire. So we get the QRS complex, and then the T wave. So we can describe it in a little bit more information. So let's go to the next slide here. So we can describe a PR interval. So that's the distance from the start of this P wave right here to the start of the QRS. So PR, it's also called PQ because that's a little bit more what it is. Depends on which lead you're looking at. This PR segment would be from here to here, so just the end of the P wave to the R. It's not used very much. I didn't almost ever use it, so you can just kind of ignore that. And then the QRS complex, QRS, so that's the area from the start of the Q to the end of the S. There's also this ST segment, which goes from the S to the start of the T. And there's also a QT interval, so start of the QRS complex to the end of the T wave. So the intervals are the big things, segments are smaller. So just going through this again, P wave is the atrial depolarization. So the atria contract, we see a P wave. The Q is the QRS is the ventricles contracting. So the electrical signal fires, we see the QRS, and the ventricles are squeezing the blood. There is this point right here called the J point. That's just the end of where this S to the start of this ST, so this flat part. So we call it the J point. It's helpful to know if you're worried about trying to memorize it, don't. You'll pick it up as it goes. And then here we have the T wave, which is just the ventricles repolarizing. So generally, if the QRS is mostly going up, the T wave is also going up. And then the U wave can occur if there's like another very delayed repolarization. Okay, so here we have again the PR segment. So from the start of the P to the Q. So sometimes it's called the PQ segment. And there's a little bit of a delay. You can see this P wave goes, and then we have a delay, and then the ventricles contract with the QRS. So that's due to an AV nodal delay. So the AV node delays the signal, and then it fires the ventricles. And then the QT is the time from the ventricles contracting to then repolarizing. And this is just another picture showing the directions of the heart. So like lead 1 is on the left, AVF is going straight down. This would be lead 2, 60. This would be lead 3, 120 degrees. And then over here, this would really be anything. You could have AVR a little bit higher up here. So looking at normal ECG, so how it works is you have 12 different pictures of the heart. Over on this side, 1, 2, 3, AVR, AVL, AVF. Those are all of your limb leads. So the ones you had stuck onto their arms and legs. V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, and V6 are the precordial leads. So going across, so we showed before, going across the chest here, just below the arm. So the kind of thing to get used to, at least what I found, is trying to get used to the fact that, I mean, when I was like thought of ECGs, I always thought it went, Q and then the R and then the S and like then the T after. I always thought it was like exactly like that. Well, a normal heart can actually not look like that, depending on which lead you're looking at. So let's just look at so this is a normal ECG, so let's just break it down. So if we're looking at lead 1, which was off to the left, we can still see there's a little Q wave here, it goes down a little bit, then a big R, and then a little S, and then there's the T. And if we go to lead 2, you can see P, little Q, R, not really any S, and then a T. And so this is normal. And then lead 3, so this is a little bit now towards the right. So little P, Q, R, and then a T. AVR is kind of flipped, so it's going to look opposite of everything, and that is normal. You generally don't need to look at it except for a couple of cases, but just to show you, so the P is instead going down because it's on the opposite side of the heart, and we see a little bit of an R wave, so it starts with an R. This is S. Q is only if it's the very first thing before the R. If it's after the R, it's an S. So R, S, and then the T is also inverted because we're on the opposite side. AVL here, this one looks a little bit different, but it's still normal. Everything else is normal as well. So you can see this P goes a little bit down. It can also go up, that's normal. And then R, S, and then T. And then if we go to AVF, we see the P, Q, R, and then the T. And if we go over to the precordial leads, so the chest leads, these ones kind of go from predominantly being down, which is S, so predominantly S, and then they become more and more R. So as they get to lead 6, it goes to an R shape. So here we can see it goes P, R, S, and there's a big S, T. P, R, and then even, well, a little bit of a bigger R, and the S is pretty big. And then P, and then the R is getting bigger now. P, R is getting definitely bigger now. S, P, and then R. So the R is now predominantly most of the way. And then on this one, V6, it's almost all R. So that's important. You want to see the R wave getting bigger as you go from V1 to V6. And around V3 or V4, it's about the same between R and then S. So naturally, that last diagram was simplified. This would be like an actual ECG printout would look like, plus some of the patient information at the top and the computer's interpretation. So each of these leads are corresponding the same way. So this is lead 1, 2, 3, and then over here, AVR, AVL, AVF, and then the precordial leads, V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6. Lead 2 is at the bottom here, and it'd go across the whole page. This is all lead 2. So this is usually where you'd be counting your heart rates and figuring out the rhythms, because it's the constant. Over here, we can see lead 1, so you can see it's going up mostly, so normal ECG. And lead 2 is also mostly going up. Same for lead 3, it's mostly going up. And AVR, it's going opposite way, that's correct, so that's normal. AVL, it's going up mostly. AVF, it's going up mostly. And if we go to V1, we can see the S is really big here. Yeah, there's a little R, but big S, okay, normal. And then the R is a little bit bigger, It's about equal at V3. It's bigger in V4. That's good. V5, it's even bigger. In V6, there's almost no S. It's predominantly an R wave. So we're good to go. Normal ECG. And this is just another picture of another normal ECG. So again, so you could be seeing like there's the P, Q, there's no Q here. So go R, S, and then this just kind of comes up a little bit, and then T, P, R, S, T. Or yeah, so there's not always a Q. And then you can see it's mostly going up here. This guy's a little bit down, so it's a little bit different, but still within normal. And then V1, you can see it's going with the small r, bigger, 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 and then predominantly R. So it doesn't necessarily mean the R is bigger in V6. There's just more R than S in V6. That's normal. So when we're talking about the different leads, so when you have 12 pictures of the heart, you kind of want to group it according to the section of the heart you're looking at. So generally, how I like to do it when I look at the ECG is I start with the left side of the heart, so lateral. So that would be lead 1 and AVL. So that'd be on the left side of the heart. And if you remember the chest leads, V5 and V6 would also be on that lateral side of the heart. I usually just start with 1 and AVL together, and I just come back to these because I do all the precordial V1 through 6 leads as a unit. So 1 and AVL is left. Then I can look at the inferior part of the heart. So lead 2 going towards the left foot, V3 going towards the right foot, and AVF going straight down. So that's the bottom of the heart. And then I can look at the precordial leads, so V1 and V2 here. So I'm looking right at the septum, so right in the middle of the heart, between the ventricles. V3 and V4 would be kind of like anterior apical, so just kind of a little bit more to the left, but still in the front of the heart. So that'd be like your left anterior descending artery. And then V5 and V6 would be on that kind of more lateral side. So you could just read these all as a unit, checking that R wave. Okay. This is just another picture describing that again. So just on the ECG itself. So 1 and AVL are left, 2, 3 AVF are inferior, V1 and V2 are the septum, V3 and V4 are anterior, V5 and V6 are anterior / low lateral. So if here it has a note, V5 and V6 are 2 rib spaces lower than the center of the heart, so they're slightly inferior leads. So when you're reading the ECG, sometimes you're reading them more to see the left side of the heart, sometimes you're reading them more to see the inferior part of the heart, depending where the heart attack was. You'll learn this as you go. So comparing the anatomy again. So again, just to revisit this, because that's the whole point. What part of the heart are you looking at? If you're looking at the right coronary artery, V4R, that's special lead. If you're looking at the left anterior descending artery, you're looking at that V1 through 4. If you're looking at the posterior descending artery around the back of the heart, so we're at the back of the heart now, we're looking at 2, 3, and AVF, which are inferior leads. You could be using V8 and V9, which are posterior leads. Be looking at the mirror image with V1 and 2. So if there was a STEMI, so ST elevation myocardial infarction, it would instead be a depression because it's a mirror image. This will come up again later. And then you could be looking at V5 and V6 if it was a circumflex artery due to anatomy, anatomical differences for people, feeding that posterior descending artery. And the left circumflex artery, you're looking at 1 AVL, so or V5 and V6. So practice questions are on assess.med. You can just do the week 1 ECG practice, PQRST, and then the week 1 ECG practice basics. I won't do any of those here because they're all basically multiple choice, and there's probably not too much benefit from me demonstrating A, B, C, or D. So in summary, we covered ECG basics, lead positioning, areas of the heart, blood supply of the heart, PQRST, and what normally ECG looks like. And remembering that the R wave gets bigger as you go from V1 to V6. Awesome, thank you.